Welcome back to the Business Roundtable podcast. I am your host, David Carr, bringing people together to accomplish great things, founder of Steward Your Business. We are back this week with a brand new guest, Paige Wiese. We're super excited to have her here from Touring Digital. And Paige is not only the founder, she's been doing award-winning digital agency work, helping businesses for over 15 years. And so we're super excited to have you come and share a little bit about your leadership journey, how you've helped work with I think over 2,000 clients. You've worked with many, many people across different industries. Welcome to the podcast, Paige.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you, David.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you here too. One thing I like to do before we get into the kind of the meat or the problem oftentimes that you're facing, our guests are facing, is hearing about your own entrepreneurial journey. Like, what got you to where you're at today? What got you to birthing this cool company now, Touring Digital. And if you wouldn't mind, Paige, just take us back a little bit, our listeners that are encountering you for the first time, so that they can know a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started Touring Digital back in 2008, 2010-ish, when the economy was not ideal. And then obviously I've been through several other times of that over the years. And, really was just like trying to figure out, how do I make money? I was 23, out of architecture, which was not a great industry to be in at the time. And really just at a crossroads of, what do I do with life? Where do I go from here? What's next? And decided, why not give web design a try? Started learning and teaching myself web design, WordPress most specifically. And from there, I decided, hey, how do I get business? I didn't have anyone I left corporate bringing a bunch of clients with me, or I didn't have a bunch of, student colleagues with me, where I'd be like, oh, hey, let me bounce this idea off of you. So I really just head down and started putting some ads up on Craigslist, understood their algorithm, what was working, what wasn't, all of that. And then about a year and a half in, I had a pretty full client list where I no longer had to rely on Craigslist. And from there, just really developing and cranking out websites, but always listening to the clients of I can design pretty sites. That's not the problem. But if they're providing content, it's usually not that great. So we started bringing content writing into our service offering. And then we were running into hosting issues. So we started bringing hosting into our services, and just kept growing that agency into, hey, what else is not working? I joke with my team, and I'm like, if we get one call too often, we're going to figure out how to fix that issue, for good. I don't want to keep hearing, why is this happening? Right. So if it's speed, let's fix that for good. If it's emails, let's fix that for good. So that's another way that we really developed out the company, was listening to what's working, what's not working, and how do we solve that problem?
Well, I think that's great. And then knowing that you started this business back, I remember that time when the economy was really tanking, and you and I share that background in the AEC industry. I've been in the environmental consulting world for 25 years, and I've seen the ups and downs as well. But the fact that you've been able to weather the storms, manage that, and I think to your point of communicating well what you're trying to do, how you're helping people, because you're helping businesses. What I thought was impressive, as we talked before this recording, was that you serve multiple types of groups, from restaurant groups, PE-backed companies, a variety of different folks. So you have some flexibility and adjusting, and that's challenging, because sometimes people aren't as flexible in that way.
Yeah, well, that's what we noticed. I mean, it's not a one size fit all shop, right? I mean, in general, marketing shouldn't be, websites shouldn't be. And I remember having lots of conversations with my business coaches growing the business, and go to packages, It'll be so much easier for you. You won't spend all the time on proposals. And I was just like, I can sit here and say a 5-page site is going to be blank, but at the end of the day, they might not need 5. They might need 4 pages and some really robust contact form that's a request a quote, right? And so we just really learned to keep that flexibility, and found that we can keep a process, keep the customer journey very consistent, but still allow for that fluctuation and that customization. And that's really what's allowed us to, work with so many different clients on so many different levels. And again, what's the issue? Let's not create new issues. Let's not touch what's not broke, and, really dive into, let's just get to the root of that. And if we can do that, you're off and running, and we'll be back when you're ready for us again, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I love that. And one of the things that when we talked before we started this recording, and I think I liked your philosophy, and why I wanted to have you on a guest, because you look at this, and I think as I get it, as the digital presence as is a business asset. It's not just a marketing tool, and I think that's a little different. Than sometimes you get a lot of digital agencies that are just trying to sell you a tool, and like you to your point, it may not be the best tool or the resource or how they do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we see it in a few different ways. One, we see that businesses look at, I need a website because everyone's telling me I need a website, or people are online. I need to be on social media because that's where my audience is. So while I absolutely hate it, that's where I got to be. And so, I think that's one place where like, no, 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 that's an asset. Like a digital presence is really like a foundation and really aids your business's growth in a variety of ways. And a lot of them don't look at it. They just, I think, look at it as the necessary of, evils, if you will. And then on the other front, yeah, it's like you have all of these assets, though, as far as your CRM is still a digital tool. And I'm not here to tell you what CRM to use. As we've worked with so many different industries, we've seen there are reasons for certain companies to use certain pieces. And so
Mhm,
we really like to say, what's going to be the best one for yours, or where are you at?
mhm,
Sometimes MailChimp is better than ActiveCampaign, and
mhm,
it just comes down to pricing and functionality and tools and what are you trying to run. And I think a lot of agencies get caught up in like, that's the one we know, so that's the only one we're going to do. And for us, it's like, no, how do we make your business make sure it's successful with these assets? And then from there, how are we keeping track of all of these assets that make your business run and function?
Well, so speaking of digital assets, you bringing that up, is I guess I'm the question I'm supposing. I know we've talked about this, but you worked with all these clients. What are the biggest mistakes that you see with when it comes to their websites or their digital presence out there, Paige? What are you seeing as a big problem, or a big problem?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest problem that we run into with clients is just not knowing who has ownership, not knowing
Mm,
where logins are to the important pieces that make their
mm,
business run, or not knowing when those things are going to expire. Just
mm.
hoping and really betting on the fact that it's on auto renew or that the credit card is going to just
Oh
run the
man.
next time it's set to run. And so that's the one that we see more and more. And I think as we've gotten thus far in technology and still obviously continuing to advance at a rapid pace, it's more often than ever. Every phone call we get in, there's someone looking to hunt down login details. And
Ooh.
so it's just really frustrating for the client. I mean, we're used to it. We know how to recover a lot of things, but for the client, it slows us down. It doesn't make the edits as fast as we want. It doesn't make recovery as quickly as we want. It's usually halting business. It's usually halting leads or marketing efforts in some
Mhm,
capacity. So it's not just like, oh, I'll find that login when it's available and ready. It's no, we need it now if you want your business to be back up and running in some capacity.
mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think probably when you're starting with small companies, that gets lost. I work with clients and they have like a lot of procurement sites they all go to, and like one person signed up for this one, this person signed up for this one. It's like, does we have any like master one of this? No.
And I'm guilty of it. I mean, same thing with the procurement side, right? I mean,
Huh?
yeah, like, hey, okay, this is something an intern can set up. And if we can just have the standard fields all ready to go that we know they're going to ask, go set up another one. And great, here's a new portal. Let's go set that up. And I mean, that's one example of, yeah, there's a lot of logins. And if you let something like that go, you might be missing a lead that could be impactful for your business, right? A lot of the
Mhm,
procurement ones really come with a hefty price tag. And so if you
mhm,
close that deal, that can mean so much for your business. And so I think that's a great example where we start to see more so in smaller companies with like the use of VAs that has really taken off in the last few years. We're seeing
mhm,
more interns coming in, sometimes nonprofits. We see a lot of interns come in and yeah, they're just tasked to set stuff up. And sometimes they're like, great, I'll use my personal because you never gave me an email address to use this. Or they set it up under their own because they didn't know that company policy was to use info at or webmaster at or marketing at, so that there was always that consistency. Well, then that employee leaves and you guys shut down the email address that goes along with it, and no one's getting the recovery emails anymore. And no one knows how to recover it because it's not going anywhere when they do the password reset. So
mhm.
now it's again an even lengthier recovery process of who do we have to contact at support to get this, back up and running and prove that we own this?
Right. Well, and I would imagine, Paige, I was in a networking group today, and I was talking with intellectual property lawyer, and she was talking about a lot of people hire folks or even their employees will just grab digital assets out there, pictures, videos that's copyrighted, and they don't realize that they're using that and the damage that they can do being sued or, litigated. They're and if they don't know or haven't accounted for all that stuff, right? So is that something that you guys look into as well as making sure that we're
We look
addressing
into
them?
Yeah, we look into it a bit. I mean, the photos get a little bit harder. Is it's like
Mm,
who is the one getting it, you know? Is
yeah,
it a graphic design vendor? Is it this or
right.
that? When we look at like our digital asset management services, we've got about 7 pillars that all
Hmm.
fall into like where all of these assets go. And you're
Yeah.
bringing up a good point that the brand elements are. So who's
Mm,
got the logo? Is this the right version of the logo?
yeah.
Is this the logo from 3 years ago and we've made tweaks? What does that look like? But it does go even further into here are the set videos that we want to use. Here are the set photos that we want to use. These are brand photography that we've had taken. Can the team easily access that? If you're,
Mhm.
doing some sort of speaking event or workshop or something, does the team know what photo to pass along that is an approved photo? And so, you get into it a little bit there. And then, yeah, beyond that, you start hitting some of the IP stuff too. And you're correct. I think, a lot of agencies aren't fully paying attention to how are we providing, rights and copyright and I'm spacing on the word, but
Yeah.
ownership for
Ownership. Mhm.
like icons and stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like, great, we added the icon to the site, but did we cite where we got it from? And so, those are areas for sure that can definitely create a lot of issues for clients. And I think as that owner starts to get removed and hand things off, as they should, and they're growing,
Mhm.
but as they start to do that, it really does go like, so what happens when you get the cease and desist letter, right? And because it's gonna come. And
Yeah.
so now who's responsible for that? Was this approved? Where's the copy of the receipt that was purchased? Whose account was it purchased under? Sometimes what we
Yeah.
run into is fonts are purchased through like an account, but they don't actually allow commercial use. It's
Mm.
personal use. And so if you're just going and grabbing fonts off of the internet and then using them in your print media, you might not actually have the commercial license to use it in that capacity. And so
Mhm.
all things you're bringing up really, really great points that businesses aren't paying attention to. They're just like, it looks good, put it out the door.
Put it out there. So you mentioned, Paige, you've got, I'd love to hear you go through your approach of how do you do this. You said you have got these pillars that you go through. So if you wouldn't mind, just walk us through what is it that sets the tree ring approach different, and why did you pick these pillars? What are these that you're kind of holding up the business house, so to speak?
Yeah. So, one thing that's different is a lot of agencies are going to focus on the marketing side, the website side, sometimes both. And that's going to go into social media platforms, Google Analytics, Google My Business, your hosting, your domain name, your website. But
Hmm.
that's usually where a lot of agencies start to stop. They maybe don't even handle the hosting. It's handled through a different company, or you start to get multiple vendors involved. And so it's like, who's taking ownership of this piece of it? What does that look like? And so that's where we really started noticing that gap is when we started asking the questions of where are the login details, it was always with somebody else. It was never with the owner or the person we were speaking with, right? And so we started realizing how much of a disconnect there is and a lack of ownership in these digital assets. So, for example, we had a client call us a couple weeks ago and they were like, "Hey, can you help me?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do what we can. Tell me what's going on." And they're like, "Our web designer just passed away unexpectedly." And I was like, "Oh, geez, I'm so sorry to hear." And I thought they were just calling us for like, can you update our website with some changes, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, do that. Well, no, they were said, hey, he controlled the domain name, the email addresses, the hosting, and the
Oh
website.
my
And
gosh.
even though he had at some point passed along the login details to the website, it had changed. And so we're sitting there going, is there any way we can recover these things? What does that look like? And they immediately had to shut off Google Ads because the website was displaying an error that couldn't be reached. And so, that was one issue. Then we had to go through, well, your emails aren't working because your domain's not working. And so until we can get the domain working, we, really can't do too much on some of the recovery systems either. And then we had to start working through, hey, how do we go to who's hosting it? It was a resold account. So even that was hidden and locked down until
Oh
we
my
got really deep
gosh.
into all of our tools and everything we knew. And so, I mean, it just turned into a headache that shouldn't have been that way. They should have
Mm-hmm.
had some sort of cPanel login details. They should have had full ownership of their domain name and been able to quickly just reset a password and move on, or already had it and didn't need to reset a password. And then
Mm-hmm.
same thing with the website, where that typically would have been, you know what, let's grab a backup. Let's move it to a new server. We'll keep you running and we'll figure out what we want to do with the hosting later. We couldn't even log into the site to pull the backup. So then the conversation starts, are we going to redesign? Are we just going to try to mirror what's currently there into a new environment and get you going that way? And so, I mean, it just turned into this huge headache for the client and so much lost business that,
Mm-hmm.
like it's still weeks and we're still finding, like, how do we fully get everything back up and running? How do we work through proof of death certificate? That's a bit of an extreme example, but it
Yeah,
happens,
yeah, yeah.
right? And that's just because they thought their vendor had it under control. So that's how we, kind of start, is the domain and the hosting. Then we get into the marketing. Then we get into analytics and social profiles. Then we get into the brand development and what you mentioned with the images and the
Mm-hmm.
logo files, everything there. How are those all set and stored? Then we move into more of like the third party tools and integration. Do you have Stripe integrated into your website? What do we need to do to make sure that's recovered in the future should something happen and that you do in fact have ownership? CRMs, all sorts of tools like that. Then we go into security and backup recovery. Are we having all of the right tools in place, and what happens should something go down? And then finally,
Mm-hmm.
we get into compliance and legal. So do we have the right disclaimers, the ADA compliance, the privacy policies, all of those aspects that go into the site as well, to make sure that you are staying compliant with the various pieces? And to your point, what is the standard of practice and the policies when a employee comes in or a vendor comes in and starts purchasing these things? Do they go straight to you for ownership? Do they stay with the vendor? Are they providing you proof that they purchased it? So we really start to go through. First, we do an assessment where we check on all of we just identify the gaps.
Yeah.
Then we'll
Mm-hmm.
dive into the digital asset audit, where we'll really work through with the client to go through every piece they have and gain ownership, and not just of the login details, but whose recovery emails on file, whose credit cards on file, when do things expire,
Mm-hmm.
what's the two factor, and work through all of this. Roughly at the end of the day, there's over 300 digital assets that go into a business being online and having an online presence. And I say usually when we ask clients, they're basically identifying domain, hosting, website, couple social profiles, right? Maybe analytics, but we really start to see that they're not identifying that there's so much more than that out there that goes into their business being online and successfully online.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so much you just outlined there, Paige. But one of the things the word that popped up to me was ownership, not like owning it, but I think, and then there's a ownership or delegation, or people are given certain authority to do certain things. But I'm sure you're seeing that's probably unclear in the business, right? And then you're probably trying to get this done and work with people, and like, who is maybe not quite the owner, but delegated or responsible party. And there's a breakdown, because that's one thing I work with is the people side of things, and how are they working together and collaborating. And you just listed a whole bunch of different groups of people that I heard that,
Yes.
like, we've got to pull all these different people together, right?
Right. And most of them aren't talking. Most of the time, like, nobody knows who's, handling the IT compared to the Google Analytics, right? Like,
Hmm.
those two pieces aren't talking, whether it's internally in a team or whether it's vendors and whatnot. And so, yeah, and same thing, employees and vendors are two very different things. If
Hmm.
they set up Google Ads, is it the company's property or is it the vendor's property?
Hmm.
And if you cancel that relationship, what happens? And are you losing all of the keywords and historical data of the ads you've ran? Is that staying with the company? Like, what does that look like? So, there's more people just like, yeah, we'll hire this company and we'll be good and we'll deal with it later. And it, like, yeah, sure, that works to some extent until it's more, of an issue. Or just like that, if they disappear, how are we going to get that back? How are we going to get
Hmm.
logged back in? We had that happen with the client where, I mean, they even just, hey, we've contacted the web hosting company so many times, they're unresponsive. And now we literally have no idea how to access our hosting to move our site to a different provider. And so, that's where we see it way too often. And I think it's
Hmm.
because businesses are growing at such a rapid pace. And then there's
Yep.
more and more tools out there and available than ever before. And so trying to keep track of it. But yeah, most agencies won't go into that entire
Yeah.
array of everything that's covered. They're really gonna stop at, nope, we handle marketing. You can go talk to somebody else about that. Or nope, that's not in our wheelhouse. We can't answer those questions.
So you, to me, what I'm hearing you, Paige, is you've developed a team at TreeWing that understands this process, this journey, if you will, so that they're asking those questions. Because, like you said, you're probably like finding the gaps. You're like, yeah, nobody's really responsible for that. And then that's where I love having you on here, because I love working with the business owners and the teams. Like, okay, Paige has identified this problem. The tree ring is these are these problems. How are we going to solve that? How are you going to get those people? You got solutions, but it's ultimately too, you've got to figure out. I find sometimes empowering some people, like, I don't want to do that. That's not my area. That's somebody else. Is like, well, who else is going to do that? How are we going to develop that? How are we going to work to get you any? Because I've been on your side of working with folks and like, hey, we really to help you, but there's nobody there getting me what I need. Right?
Well, they just don't know.
They
We've
don't
seen
know.
marketing teams come to us and hire us out, and then I'm like asking questions, and they're like, we didn't know we needed to look for that, or how do we recover it? And I'm like, how do you not know how to recover this? Like, it's part of marketing, or it's part of, blank. But they just don't. Or if the company is not pushing them harder to document all of these things, then it is just like, we don't know where the receipt is for that stock image that we've, purchased to prove that we did in fact purchase it. And it's not just a stolen version. So, it really is honing it all in. And you're right. It's a mix of, what's the people side, what's the company standards of practice side, and then what's the where do we store all of this? How is that all in place? And so, yeah, that's where we come into and are like, is this all in one location? Do you have it scattered amongst Dropbox, Google Drive, and something else? Like, is it all written down on the, pad of paper next to the owner's, desk? Does the owner even know? I think that's one that we've seen often is, we're working with a marketing team, and while we set up something, they're like, hey, can we have ownership or access of Google My Business? And we're like, absolutely. But then we always kind of stop for a second. Like, shouldn't the owner, though, have access to that? Like, I don't mind giving it to the employee, but should the employee leave for any reason, the owner still does not have access to that. And we try to keep ourselves on a lot of these things as just a second point of backup. We've seen the
Yeah.
recovery really save us, like clients, by us still having something in place. But if they delete us, which sometimes they do, is they come in like, oh, we don't need you anymore, we're going to delete this, that employee is the one who has sole ownership. And
Yep.
so, good luck trying to recover that. And does anybody know that that happened? And those are usually personal Gmail accounts. It's not
Mm.
necessarily a, company account, because Google won't accept Microsoft. So
Mhm.
now we're even getting more into the like, hey, owner, we should probably have a talk about how you guys are setting these things up, because they're going to own your Google My Business at the end of the day, or they're going to own your Facebook profile at the end of the day if you don't also have some sort of admin here. And recovery of some of these things are extremely difficult, if possible at all. And it's going to end up coming down to cost, sometimes legal fees of how do we get the lawyer involved to ask them to hand that information over. So it can really quickly turn into a huge nightmare.
Yeah, I think to your point, it's how quickly it can be. I was just talking to a solopreneur here locally, and he had a whole Instagram account and built it up to like over 40,000 followers, all this things, doing cool video stuff, and it got hacked. And then it was tied to his Meta account, and then it shut that down too. And what, these people are sophisticated, and they really try to trick you up. Unfortunately, I get emails all the time, and if somebody doesn't know this, and like you said, they're the gatekeeper, they're one way in, you have a vulnerability. And I think the cost of the retro, unfortunately, we preach on this podcast, and why you're here, Paige, is to be proactive rather than reactive. In investing the money, yes, it might cost you a bit more than you anticipated at first, but it's going to cost you a lot more, right? And the back end, all the time and effort, if they didn't do this.
Well, I mean, and that's just it, right? Like, and out of the blue. So it might be like,
Absolutely.
sure, we know in the future we'll have to redesign our website. But the company that called me with the web developer that passed, they weren't expecting that moment. So then it's like, here is this unexpected expense. And especially at a time where businesses are a little bit tighter and watching money a little bit closer with everything going on, they're not preparing, or they don't have the massive cash flow that they used to have. And so, we see it really impact them more. Or if your marketing's down, your revenue starts to go down. And so to then offset and be able to cover these, unexpected expenses really do start to set you up more for failure, when it can be something that we can easily get ahead of and be proactive on, to your point, and not have these, and just saving the headache. We get so many
Mm.
calls of just frantic, panicking 911 phone
Mm.
calls of like, I'm lost, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, what's going on, what does this look like? And I don't mind them. I just prefer not to. That's not how I want to see a business. I want to
Mhm.
see them in a, hey, we're really good. We're ready to do more. We're ready to grow further. We want to do something different with our marketing efforts so that we keep growing and expanding. Those are the calls we'd prefer to have.
Yes. Yes.
But, inevitably we get a lot more calls that are on the reactive, panicky side. And so, yes, I'm with you. How do we be more proactive
Well,
overall?
again, and that's why we have you on the podcast page, because we want others to hopefully listen to this, and they're like, I picked up the podcast and we're talking about digital assets, and you're like, oh yeah, that's not covered, that's not covered. Maybe I should do something about this today. So I know we're getting close to the end of the podcast today. I would love, to that point, if I'm a business owner, I'm listening, we've covered a lot of different things. What is one action that they can do today to protect or maximize their digital presence right now? Paige, what would you say to them if, as they're listening to us?
Yeah, one thing I would say would be start documenting everything. But second thing I would say is we actually have a digital asset checklist that they can
Ah,
download for free at treeringdigital.com/roundtable. And that's the best way to just start identifying, what are digital assets? What is she
mm.
even talking about? But two, like, start to identify the gaps. It's a checklist. You really can just like go through and like, do you know who owns this? Can you access it this second? Are you thinking about these things? What do you have in place for recovery? And so it'll walk you through all of that. And then as you start to identify gaps, it'll, start to help you see, great, we do need to start taking some action, or wow, we're actually doing fantastic. Like, we're ahead of where we thought we were. So I would definitely recommend that they start there with the checklist. It's just a really valuable tool.
Well, thank you, Paige. We're going to put that in the show notes. I want you guys to make sure you reach out, connect with Paige. We're also on LinkedIn. You can reach out there, and treeringdigital.com. You want to go check it out. Paige, I want to just thank you for being on here, sharing your story, your insights. This has been refreshing. I think people haven't maybe talked about it in this way, and just recognizing these digital assets aren't just technical details. They're really strategic levers that help build your business value. And so I'm so grateful that you came on the podcast with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. We appreciate you always joining us on the podcast. Everybody, comments, feedback, fantastic. Liking and subscribing, whether you find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever your favorite podcast platform it is. We hope you will come back and join us. Make sure you protect your digital presence out there. And thank you again, Paige, for joining us.
Thank you.